In every good story, it often takes a villain to create a hero or a heroine. Today, I would like to talk to you about hope, about the things that in this mad world currently give me hope. So a little bit about me. I'm a fantasy author. I live in a remote cabin in Western Australia. At the link in the description, there is a free story of mine that you can get if you're curious. But yeah, I'm a fantasy author and I have been writing stories in some shape or form for the last 10-12 years. I'm originally from Germany, where I worked as a TV producer, and then I had an interlude of a couple of years working as a safari guide in Southern Africa. I wrote a book about my time as a safari guide, and so every once in a while it happened that I would receive emails about that book. And I got one of those emails from a young man, let's call him Adam. And Adam had done this safari guide training as well a few years after me. And Adam asked me in this email, how do you still have hope? And he went on to talk about how he had kind of lost his, when you do the safari guide training, essentially what you're getting is an ecological education. You're becoming ecologically literate, which means that you learn to read the African bush, read the nature like a book, which is a beautiful thing and should really exist in every country in the world so that we become ecologically literate again. But as soon as you develop an ecological point of view, an ecological mindset, the disillusionment follows pretty quickly, because you realize that nature is pretty broken. It's a fair question to ask. And so the first thing that I would tell someone who has lost hope in today's world is, I would quote Fred Rogers, the children TV host, who experienced the same thing when he was a kid and he would see all the scary news on TV. And he quoted his mum, who said, always look for the helpers. There's always someone on TV or anywhere when there's a sad situation, there's always people who help. And that is where you get your dose of hope from. A quick addition I wanted to make here is also that another story that I just remembered, which is a couple of years ago, an Australian newspaper made quite a funny mistake. The newspaper, they have sort of a template with placeholder titles that are being filled every day. So there'll be sports news here, and there'll be local announcements there, and then the main headline on the front page, that is the one that whoever was in charge that day forgot to replace. So the placeholder remained, and the newspaper went to print with the placeholder headline, which read, "The world is fucked." And I know that person probably lost their job, but the reason why I'm telling you this is that the news outlets are literally making their most money by telling you the world is fucked. Controversy is what pays the most, what gets the most clicks. And so it is becoming increasingly hard to find the helpers. You actively need to look for them. Because otherwise you're just going to believe the world is fucked, and there's actually a lot more good news out there. Also, how beautiful is this light? Another thing that I told Adam, and that is that it almost seems to me that at this moment in time, it's almost like apparently we need to go through whatever it is we're going through right now. And to quote the Lorax, unless people like you care an awful lot, nothing's going to change. I think something like that. The quote goes something like that. So what I mean by that is, it is sad, but I think there's still not enough people right now who care. Or like, I don't even think that's fair. I think as humans, we all believe that we are good people, and I think we all care about something. But I guess when it comes to this particular hope, I guess we are talking about the planet, and we're talking about the climate crisis and biodiversity loss. So I don't think there's apparently not enough people who care about these things, not out of evil, but simply because I think it is also a luxury to care about these things. It is a luxury to be able to afford an electric car, although you could also argue, is an electric vehicle really the best way forward, but that's another topic. Yeah, it is a luxury to be environmental friendly, basically, because that stuff is still not very easy in today's world. Sorry, my umbrella just opened itself up, and I think that is going to be really annoying. So bear with me as I quickly fix this. Look at this. This is not going to work. Give me a second. So it seems like, sadly, we need to go through whatever it is we go through. That doesn't mean that we should give up hope or that we should stop trying. On the contrary. But I think sometimes it helps to widen your perspective, widen your focus, and remember that not only do you live locally where you live, not only do you live on planet Earth, but you live in a universe. And I personally believe that there's a lot more happening in the whole cosmic balance of things. So it helps to zoom out. The Aborigines here in Australia also believe that there is a cleansing effect that comes from fire. And I think we can all agree that our world right now literally is on fire. And I know there's little hope in saying, oh, you got a cleansing effect, your house burnt down, cleansing effect, well done. Again, it is about this greater perspective. In storytelling, I am an author, so I care about storytelling. And in every good story, it often takes a villain to create a hero or a heroine. So Frodo would not have become the ring bearer who saved Middle Earth if it wasn't for Sauron. And I think we see this happening right now with all the bad that is happening in the world. There's a lot more heroes that are rising to the challenge, and there's hope in that. There's definitely a lot of hope in that. But yeah, in terms of the things we've already lost and the things we might still lose, there is a sadness there. There's a lot of sadness there on my part. I don't want to be the generation that loses elephants. Elephants go extinct, or rhinos go extinct, or lions go extinct, or here in Australia, cockatoos go extinct. But the dinosaurs also went extinct, and if it hadn't been for the dinosaurs, the dinosaurs walked so the elephants could run. So that is the first bit that doesn't necessarily give me hope, but it gives me perspective. The second thing, I want to tell you a story that the author Sharon Blackie told during an event when someone asked her that exact question: what gives you hope? And so Dr. Sharon Blackie, for those of you who don't know her, she's an author who writes about Celtic myths, and she also wrote the book If Women Rose Rooted. She also wrote The Enchanted Life. And in The Enchanted Life, that's where she told that story. And so the story is about an old wise woman who lives on a remote island somewhere in the North Sea. And every day she will weave a beautiful tapestry. And she puts a lot of effort into this tapestry until it's becoming more and more beautiful, until one day it's finished. There's a second player in the game, and that is the trickster crow. And so as soon as the wise woman finishes the tapestry, she needs to go tend to her fire so that it doesn't go out, and she leaves the tapestry behind, and the trickster crow will come fly in and pick apart the tapestry, and then everything is destroyed, and the wise woman comes back to her tapestry, and she's incredibly sad about all that she's lost. But then she looks down on the floor and she finds this one beautiful green thread of wool. And she doesn't even know why. But as soon as she sees that thread, she starts weaving again. And that is how the story goes, and that is how the story continues. The wise woman will weave her beautiful tapestry, she will tend to the fire, and the trickster crow will destroy the tapestry. And then the wise woman will find the thread again, and so on and so forth. And this story gives so much hope because it is a circular story. And we in the West, because of Hollywood and because of a man named Joseph Campbell, who first came up with the storytelling structure of the hero's journey, we sort of believe in the end, the happy ending at the end of a story, you know. We always believe that things have an end. But in a lot of indigenous tribes, here in Australia as well, they tell stories differently. Stories don't have an ending. Stories continue. Stories circle around to the beginning or to a new beginning. And when you think about it, that is a lot closer to our reality. History repeats itself, you know. Everything is cyclic in nature. The trees lose their leaves in the autumn, go to sleep during the winter, and then in the spring there's new leaves. It always continues. And there's a lot of hope in that. And my biggest hero in the world is Jane Goodall. And Jane Goodall literally wrote the book on hope. She wrote a book called Reason for Hope. And Jane says that whenever you're overwhelmed with these massive, giant problems in the world, you step outside your door and you change something there. Because I really think us humans, we were never meant to deal with these gigantic problems. In fact, our brains can only, I think the maximum capacity of faces or people we can remember is 1,000, which is already a lot. In fact, Jane Goodall can't remember faces at all. She has this condition. So yeah, it is very easy to get overwhelmed and disillusioned when you're trying to fix these massive problems. And I don't know, sometimes I think maybe we're not meant to, not in the sense that we should give up hope, on the contrary, but I think if every one of us just did what we can with our own two hands every day, locally. And this reminds me of Jack Harris, for those of you who don't know, was one of the first YouTubers, and he then became an activist. He formed Earthrise, which is a environmental friendly media platform. And he said in his documentary that he, after being an activist, fighting for the climate and even getting arrested as part of Extinction Rebellion, he became so disillusioned and burned out by trying so hard that he basically now retreated to the English countryside for now, for a while. No one knows how long he's going to do it, and he is kind of practicing what he preaches by trying to live more sustainably every day. He bought an old windmill that he's renovating with his own organic garden and all of that. So he literally puts his own hands in the soil, connecting with locally with the people of his country to try and make the world a better place, one day at a time, one carrot at a time. And I think that is all we can ever do. We owe so much to people like Jane Goodall who do more than that. But I also understand that not everybody has that in us. I think, like I said, these times are gonna give birth to a lot more heroes who rise up to challenge the villains and to defeat the villains. But one of the biggest things that give me hope is the idea of rewilding, which is essentially what Jack Harris is doing. And I think that's a topic in its own right. So I think that's what I talk to you about tomorrow. Rewilding the land, rewilding the self. But for now I think I'm going to go home. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe, leave me a comment, and tell me what gives you hope. I'd love to hear from you. Until tomorrow. Bye-bye. And so the best thing we can do, not just for the environment and the planet, but also for ourselves, is to rejoin the world.